I'm Angela, 35 years old, married to Thomas for 12 years now. We have a blended family, my daughter Lily, who's 16 from my previous relationship, and our son Ethan, who's 10. Thanksgiving at my in-laws' estate always makes me nervous, but this year was different. Thomas has been more critical lately, and his family has never truly accepted me. I didn't know that dinner would change everything between us. If you're watching this, please let me know where you're from in the comments, hit subscribe, and stay for a story about finding your voice when you least expect it. I met Thomas when I was working as a nurse at Memorial Hospital. I was a single mom struggling to provide for Lily, who was just 4 years old at the time. My shifts were long and exhausting, but I was determined to give my daughter the life she deserved. One night, I was assigned to assist during an emergency surgery, and that's when Thomas walked into the operating room. He was confident, skilled, and undeniably handsome in his surgical scrubs. After the successful operation, Thomas asked me out for coffee. I hesitated at first, knowing how complicated dating could be as a single parent. But there was something about his warm smile that made me take a chance. On our first date, I was upfront about having a daughter, expecting him to politely end things there. Instead, he surprised me by asking to see pictures of Lily and listening intently as I talked about her. "She sounds wonderful," he said. "I'd love to meet her someday." Thomas came from a completely different world. His family owned a sprawling estate outside the city. His father was the chief of surgery at the hospital, and his mother was from old money. They had certain expectations about the kind of woman their son would marry someday, a sophisticated doctor or lawyer from a similar background, not a nurse with a child and student loans. I grew up in a small apartment with my mother, who worked 2 jobs after my father left when I was 8. I was the first in my family to attend college, putting myself through nursing school while waiting tables at night. Our backgrounds couldn't have been more different, but Thomas didn't seem to care. When Thomas first took me to meet his parents, I felt like I was entering a different universe. Their home was more like a museum, with its marble floors, antique furniture, and family portraits dating back generations. His mother, Margaret, greeted me with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes, while his father, Robert, barely looked up from his newspaper. Thomas's sister, Amanda, made little effort to hide her disapproval, asking pointed questions about my education and family. "And where exactly did you study nursing?" Amanda asked, emphasizing the word nursing, as if it were somehow distasteful. "Community college first, then I transferred to State University," I answered honestly, feeling the weight of judgment in the room. Thomas squeezed my hand under the table. "Angela graduated with honors while raising a child on her own. She's remarkable." In those early days, Thomas always defended me. When his mother suggested he was rushing things with a woman who had so much baggage, he told her firmly that he loved me and Lily both. When his college friends made subtle jokes about me being a trophy nurse, he shut them down immediately. He made me feel secure despite the obvious disapproval from his social circle. Our wedding was beautiful but tense. Thomas wanted a large ceremony at his family's church, followed by a reception at their country club. I would have preferred something smaller and more intimate, but I compromised. His family attended with obvious reluctance, keeping mostly to themselves during the celebration. My small group of friends and my mother seemed out of place among the wealthy doctors and socialites Thomas had invited. The early years of our marriage were mostly happy. We bought a comfortable house in a good school district, and Thomas legally adopted Lily, who adored him from the start. When I got pregnant with Ethan 2 years into our marriage, Thomas was overjoyed. I cut back my hours at the hospital to part-time, balancing my career with raising our children. Thomas's surgical career flourished, and he was following in his father's footsteps, just as his family had always expected. But as Thomas gained recognition in his field, I noticed subtle changes in his attitude. He started attending more exclusive medical conferences and social events, sometimes suggesting I stay home with the kids instead of accompanying him. "These things are mostly just boring shop talk," he'd say. "You wouldn't enjoy it." At home, Thomas began making small comments about the way I dressed, spoke, or managed the household. Nothing overtly cruel, just suggestions that I could elevate myself a bit more. Maybe you could wear the blue dress I bought you instead, he'd say when I dressed for dinner with his colleagues. It's a bit more appropriate for the occasion. Or, let me order the wine, sweetheart. I know what pairs best with this meal. Little by little, the man who once defended me against his family's judgment began to echo their sentiments. I told myself he was just stressed from work, that things would return to normal when his schedule became less demanding. But deep down, I was beginning to feel the foundation of our relationship shift beneath my feet. As the years passed, holidays with Thomas's family became increasingly difficult. What started as subtle digs about my background evolved into more direct criticism about everything from my parenting style to the way I organized our home. "Lily seems quite independent for her age," Thomas's mother would comment. "In our family, we believed in more structure and supervision." Or his sister Amanda would offer unsolicited advice. "You really should consider sending Ethan to Westfield Academy instead of public school. The connections he'd make there would be invaluable for his future." I tried to take these comments in stride, reminding myself that they came from a place of different values, not necessarily malice, but the constant judgment was wearing me down. Despite these challenges, Lily and I maintained a close relationship. She was old enough now to recognize the tension with her step-grandparents and would often squeeze my hand supportively during family gatherings. At 12, she was becoming quite perceptive. "They don't get how awesome you are, Mom," she told me once on the drive home from a particularly tense Sunday dinner. "But I do." Ethan, however, was increasingly drawn to his father's family's lifestyle. He loved visiting his grandparents' estate with its swimming pool and tennis court. He soaked up their stories about family legacy and importance. At 8 years old, he began asking for the expensive clothes and gadgets his cousins had, and Thomas was all too happy to indulge him. "He's just trying to fit in," Thomas would say when I expressed concern about Ethan becoming materialistic. "There's nothing wrong with wanting nice things." I tried desperately to bridge the gap between the different value systems in our family. I encouraged Lily to join us at family events, despite her reluctance. I took Ethan volunteering at the local food bank to show him there was more to life than possessions. I invited Thomas's parents to school performances and sports games, though they rarely attended. Meanwhile, Thomas was becoming increasingly critical at home. What started as gentle suggestions about my appearance or behavior had evolved into regular criticism. "Did you really need to tell that story at dinner?" he'd ask after we had guests over. "It makes you sound unsophisticated." Or, "The house looks chaotic today. Couldn't you have straightened up before I got home?" One day, I accidentally saw a text message exchange between Thomas and his sister while using his phone to call mine when I couldn't find it. They were discussing our marriage, and Thomas was complaining about how I hadn't really changed despite his efforts to help me fit into his world better. Reading those words felt like a physical blow. The man I married had promised to love me for who I was, not as a project to be improved. Financial tensions began to surface as well. Though we both contributed to the household, Thomas controlled most of our finances, questioning my occasional indulgences like a new dress or dinner with friends, while thinking nothing of buying expensive golf clubs or taking luxury business trips. "We need to be careful with money," he'd say when I mentioned wanting to take a photography class. Yet the next day, he'd come home with a new watch that cost more than 3 months of classes would have. A particularly painful moment came when Ethan was struggling with a school assignment. I spent an evening helping him with it, using my approach of asking guiding questions to help him find the answers himself. When Thomas came home and saw us, he took over immediately. "That's not how you do it," he said, dismissing my method entirely. "Let me show you the right way, Ethan." I watched my son's eyes move from me to his father, clearly seeing who had the final say in our household. That night I cried silently in the bathroom, wondering when my husband had stopped being my partner and become my critic. Most disturbing was my growing realization that Thomas wasn't just distant or stressed. He was actively becoming more like his judgmental family. The warmth and acceptance that had drawn me to him were being replaced by the very attitudes he once protected me from. I felt trapped between maintaining peace for our children and standing up for myself. One evening, after Thomas had criticized my input at a dinner with his colleagues, I finally confronted him. "Do Do you still love me for who I am? I asked directly. Or have you decided your family was right about me all along? He looked genuinely surprised by the question. Of course I love you. I just want what's best for us for our family's standing. Our family's standing or your family's standing? I countered. The conversation ended without resolution, but it marked the beginning of my awakening. Something needed to change, but I wasn't yet sure what or how. November arrived with its crisp air and falling leaves, bringing with it the annual anxiety of Thanksgiving at the in-laws. Thomas's parents had hosted this event for decades, and it was always an elaborate affair with perfect table settings, gourmet food, and the subtle but persistent reminder that I was an outsider. My mother's expecting everyone at 4 o'clock sharp. Thomas reminded me 2 weeks before the event. She's planning a special dinner this year since my brother Jack is announcing his partnership at the law firm. I nodded, already feeling the familiar knot of tension forming in my stomach. I'll make my sweet potato casserole to bring. Thomas hesitated. Actually, Mom has the menu completely planned already. She's hired a caterer, so we don't need to bring anything. I felt another small piece of my contribution erased. Even my cooking, the one thing I could usually share with the family, was being politely rejected. As the day approached, my anxiety increased. I found myself standing in my closet night after night trying to find an outfit that would somehow magically make me acceptable to the Winters family. Nothing seemed right, too casual, too formal, too colorful, too bland. One evening, Lily found me sitting on the floor of my closet surrounded by discarded options. "Mom, are you okay?" she asked, sitting down beside me. I tried to smile. "Just trying to figure out what to wear to Thanksgiving." Lily looked at me with eyes too wise for her 16 years. "Why do you try so hard with them? They're never going to change." Her words hit me hard because I knew she was right. But I still felt I needed to try for Thomas, for our family unity. "Sometimes we do difficult things for the people we love," I told her. She was quiet for a moment. "Does Dad do difficult things for you too?" I had no answer for that. The morning of Thanksgiving, I spent extra time on my appearance. I styled my hair in elegant waves, applied my makeup carefully, and chose a burgundy dress that was tasteful and seasonally appropriate. I even wore the pearl earrings Thomas had given me for our 10th anniversary, hoping they might serve as a reminder of our connection. As we were about to leave, Thomas gave me a once-over and frowned slightly. "The dress is fine, but maybe the gold necklace would be better than the silver one. And do you need quite so much eye makeup?" I felt my confidence, carefully built over the morning, begin to crumble. Still, I made the suggested changes without complaint, telling myself it was just one day, just a few hours to get through. The car ride to the estate was tense despite my efforts to maintain cheerfulness for the children. Ethan chatted excitedly about seeing his cousins and the dessert table he remembered from last year. Lily sat quietly, occasionally catching my eye in the rearview mirror with a supportive glance. Thomas drove in silence, seeming preoccupied. When we arrived, the estate was picture-perfect as always. Fall wreaths adorned the double front doors, and through the windows I could see elaborate floral arrangements and the soft glow of candles. Taking a deep breath, I plastered on my best smile and prepared to enter what sometimes felt like enemy territory. The house was warm and filled with the aroma of roasting turkey and spices, but the atmosphere felt cold. Thomas's mother greeted us in the foyer, air-kissing Thomas and cooing over Ethan while giving Lily and me brief, perfunctory hugs. "Angela, dear, you look comfortable," she said, her eyes lingering on my carefully chosen dress in a way that made me instantly regret not trying on more options. The living room was filled with Thomas's extended family: his brother Jack and wife Stephanie, his sister Amanda, and her husband Peter. Various aunts, uncles, and cousins, all dressed impeccably and engaged in animated conversations about topics that excluded me: travel to exclusive destinations, shared memories of private school days, mutual friends I'd never met. I tried to join a conversation between Amanda and 2 cousins, offering a comment about a book they were discussing that I'd recently read. They paused briefly, acknowledging my input with tight smiles, then seamlessly continued as if I hadn't spoken, slightly shifting their bodies to create a physical circle that excluded me. Seeking something useful to do, I made my way to the kitchen thinking I might help with meal preparations. Thomas's mother was directing the caterers with the precision of a military general. "Can I help with anything?" I offered. She turned to me with a practiced smile. "Oh, no, dear. Everything's under control. Why don't you go relax with the others?" The kitchen's rather crowded at the moment. As I turned to leave, I overheard her murmur to her sister. "She means well, but she wouldn't know what to do with half the ingredients we're using." The comment stung, but it was nothing I hadn't heard before in some form or another. I retreated to a quiet corner of the living room, watching Ethan play happily with his cousins, while Lily sat beside me, her nose deliberately buried in her phone as a shield against interaction. "You okay, Mom?" she whispered. I squeezed her hand. "Always." But I wasn't okay. I was tired of feeling judged, tired of the constant effort to fit into a world that had no intention of making space for me. And increasingly, I was tired of Thomas's failure to notice or care. The formal dining room of the Winters estate was a showcase of old money elegance. The massive mahogany table gleamed under the light of a crystal chandelier, set with fine china, sterling silver flatware, and crystal glasses for different wines. Place cards in perfect calligraphy directed each guest to their assigned seat. I noticed immediately that Thomas and I had been separated, with him placed near his parents at the head of the table, while I was relegated to the far end, near some distant relatives I barely knew. Lily had been seated next to me, while Ethan was placed between his cousins, closer to the center of the table. "Welcome, everyone," Thomas's father announced once we were all seated. "Before we begin this wonderful meal Margaret has arranged, I'd like to propose a toast to family traditions and to another year of achievements for the Winters family." Everyone raised their glasses in unison, a choreographed movement I was always slightly late to join. I took a small sip of the wine, conscious of not drinking too much. The last thing I needed was to give them ammunition by saying something unfiltered. The initial conversation revolved around pleasant small talk. The unseasonably warm weather, compliments on the table setting, and updates on distant relatives not present. I contributed little, focusing instead on helping Lily navigate the multiple forks and spoons that intimidated her. Then Thomas's brother Jack cleared his throat dramatically. "Since we're all together, Stephanie and I have some news to share." The table fell silent in anticipation. "I've been made senior partner at the firm," he announced proudly, his arm around his wife. "And we've just put a deposit down on the lake house we've been eyeing for years." The table erupted in congratulations and excited questions. Thomas's mother dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. "We always knew you were destined for greatness, Jack," she said. "The Winters men have always excelled." Thomas raised his glass. "To my brilliant brother." "Well deserved." I smiled and offered my congratulations as well, genuinely happy for Jack, despite his occasional condescension toward me. Then, feeling a rare moment of family engagement, I decided to share my own news. "I actually have some news too," I said during a lull in the conversation. "I've been promoted to nursing director for the entire pediatric unit." There was a brief moment of acknowledgement from a few family members, some nods, and murmured congratulations before Thomas interjected. "It's just a small administrative step-up," he said dismissively, "but Angela's always been good with organizing schedules and such." I felt my cheeks burn. My promotion had come after years of additional certifications, training, and dedicated work. It wasn't just about scheduling. It represented leadership of an entire department and a substantial pay increase. Actually, I began wanting to clarify the significance of the role, but Thomas's sister Amanda was already changing the subject, asking loudly about Ethan's private tennis lessons, which I had opposed as too expensive, but Thomas had insisted upon. As the main course was served, the conversation drifted toward family history and shared memories, another area where I was inherently excluded. I focused on my meal, occasionally checking on Lily, who was pushing food around her plate while tapping occasional messages on her phone under the table. Then Thomas's mother turned her attention to me. "Angela, dear, Lily seems very attached to that phone. In our family, we never allowed devices at the dinner table." Before I could respond, Thomas jumped in. "I've told Angela the same thing, Mother, but she's always been more permissive with Lily than I think is appropriate. I stared at him, stunned by the public criticism of my parenting. Lily is doing research for her history project, I said, trying to keep my voice level. She has my permission. That's the problem right there, Thomas continued, as if I hadn't spoken now, addressing the entire table. There's no consistency. I try to set standards, but Angela undermines them because she feels guilty about Lily's father not being in the picture. I felt like I'd been slapped. Thomas and I had different parenting approaches, certainly, but we'd never discussed this in front of others, let alone his entire extended family. And bringing up Lily's biological father, a painful subject for both of us, was completely uncalled for. Perhaps this isn't the best topic for Thanksgiving dinner, I suggested quietly. Oh, we're all family here, Thomas's mother said with a wave of her hand. And Thomas is only saying what we've all observed. Ethan thrives with proper structure, while Lily seems to make her own rules. I looked at Lily, whose face had flushed deep red with embarrassment and anger. Ethan was watching wide-eyed, his fork suspended halfway to his mouth. Can we change the subject, please? I asked, my voice slightly stronger. But Thomas wasn't finished. He had consumed several glasses of wine by this point, and his filter seemed to have disappeared entirely. Speaking of family observations, he said with a laugh that contained no humor, did I ever tell you all about Angela at the physician's gala last month? My stomach dropped. I knew exactly what story he was about to tell, and I silently pleaded with my eyes for him to stop. He ignored me. So the sommelier presents this rare vintage Bordeaux, explaining its provenance and notes and all that. Thomas continued, clearly playing to his audience, and he asks Angela what she thinks of the bouquet. Several family members were already smiling in anticipation. Thomas was now in full performance mode, and Angela, looking completely lost, says, "Oh, I didn't know they served flowers with the wine." The table erupted in laughter. I sat frozen, the humiliation washing over me in waves. Yes, I had misunderstood the wine terminology, having grown up in a household where wine came in boxes when we could afford it at all. But the way Thomas was presenting the story, one innocent mistake turned into evidence of my fundamental unworthiness, made me feel utterly betrayed. Then, Thomas continued, encouraged by the laughter, when they explained what a bouquet was, she tried to cover by pretending she knew all along. She took this enormous sniff like she was trying to inhale the whole glass and announced it had notes of grape and alcohol. More laughter, louder this time. Thomas's mother was actually wiping tears from her eyes. His father was shaking his head with a knowing smile that said, "What did you expect from someone like her?" I sat there in complete silence, my face burning, fighting back tears. The room seemed to spin slightly as I gripped the edge of the table. I had shared that misunderstanding with Thomas privately in the car afterward, embarrassed, but trusting him to keep it between us. Instead, he had turned it into dinner entertainment at my expense. As the laughter gradually subsided, the room grew uncomfortably quiet. Several people seemed to finally register my distress, glancing away awkwardly. Thomas, still chuckling, reached for his wineglass again, oblivious to or uncaring about the pain he had caused. And that's when Lily pushed back her chair and stood up. The scrape of Lily's chair against the hardwood floor cut through the uncomfortable silence. All eyes turned to my daughter as she stood straight, her hands slightly trembling, but her gaze steady and fierce. "You know what I think is really funny?" she said, her voice clear despite a slight quaver. "I think it's hilarious that a room full of supposedly educated people think it's okay to laugh at someone for not knowing something." The table fell completely silent. Thomas's smile faltered. "Lily, sit down," he said in a low voice. "This doesn't concern you." "Doesn't it?" Lily replied, her confidence growing with each word. "Because the person you're all laughing at is my mother, and I think that absolutely concerns me." She looked around the table, making deliberate eye contact with each person who had laughed. Several had the decency to look ashamed. "You all think you're so superior with your fancy degrees and big houses," she continued. "But none of you know the first thing about my mom. Let me tell you what I know." My heart swelled with a mixture of pride and anxiety as my teenage daughter stood her ground against the entire Winters family. When I was 7 and needed a special tutor for my dyslexia, do you know what my mom did? She picked up weekend shifts at the hospital, working 60-hour weeks, so I could get the help I needed. She'd come home exhausted but still sit with me for an hour every night helping me practice my reading. Thomas shifted uncomfortably in his chair. This was something even he hadn't fully appreciated, as we weren't married yet during that period. When I was 10 and got invited to Jenny Miller's birthday party at that expensive horse ranch, Mom couldn't afford the gift all the other kids were bringing. So she stayed up 3 nights in a row after her shifts to hand-make the most beautiful dream catcher anyone had ever seen. Jenny still has it hanging in her room 7 years later, while all those expensive toys are long forgotten. Lily turned her gaze directly to Thomas's mother. Did you know that Mom studies medical journals at night after everyone's asleep? Not because she has to, but because she wants to understand what the doctors are talking about so she can better advocate for her patients. She can explain complex procedures to scared parents in ways that actually make sense to them. I felt tears welling in my eyes, but they were different from the tears of humiliation earlier. I hadn't realized Lily had noticed these things, had been paying such close attention. "And you," she said, turning to Thomas, her voice wavering slightly with emotion. "You used to see all this. You used to tell me how amazing my mom was, how lucky we were to have her. What happened to you?" Thomas's face had drained of all color. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. "My mom worked her way through nursing school while raising me alone. She graduated with honors. She just got promoted to run an entire hospital department because she's exceptional at what she does. But instead of being proud of her, you turned her achievement into a joke and made her feel small in front of your family." Lily's voice broke slightly, and I could see tears in her eyes now too. But she wasn't finished. "Do you want to know something really funny, Thomas? Last month, when you were at that medical conference, Mom got a call that one of her former patients had relapsed. She drove 2 hours to sit with that family all night holding their hands while they waited for news. She didn't tell you because she didn't want to bother you with her work stuff, which is what you always say when she tries to talk about her day." Several of Thomas's relatives were now looking at him with expressions ranging from surprise to disapproval. His sister Amanda was staring at her plate, unable to meet anyone's eyes. "You all think being able to identify fancy wine or having the right connections makes you special," Lily continued, looking around the table. "But my mom saves lives and holds families together during their worst moments. She gives everything she has to help others, including all of you, even when you've never shown her an ounce of the respect she deserves." Then Lily turned to me, her expression softening. "Mom, you've taught me to stand up for what's right, to be kind, even when others aren't, and to never let anyone make me feel less than I am. It's time you followed your own advice." The dining room remained frozen in stunned silence. Thomas sat pale and rigid, looking like someone had just pulled the ground out from under him. His father cleared his throat awkwardly but found no words. His mother's perfectly composed facade had cracked, showing genuine shock. Ethan, who had been watching with wide eyes, suddenly spoke up in his small voice. "My mom helps me build really cool science projects, and all my friends think she's awesome." This unexpected addition from my 10-year-old son broke the tension slightly. A few nervous chuckles rippled around the table, but they were different from the mocking laughter earlier. Softer, more uncomfortable, perhaps even appreciative of the child's loyalty. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling unsteady, but my resolve strengthening. "Lily, thank you. And Ethan, thank you too, sweetheart." I turned to Thomas, who still looked shell-shocked. "May I have the car keys, please? The children and I are going home." Thomas fumbled in his pocket and handed me the keys without a word, his fingers trembling slightly. His eyes held a mixture of emotions I couldn't fully decipher. Shock, embarrassment, perhaps the dawning of regret. As I gathered my things and motioned for the children to follow me, Thomas's cousin Sarah, who had always been a bit kinder than the rest, touched my arm gently. "Angela, I'm sorry. I had no idea." She trailed off, clearly unsure what to say. "Neither did I for a long time," I replied quietly. "But I think I see things more clearly now." With that, I walked out of the dining room with my head high, my children by my side. For the first time in 12 years of winter family gatherings, I felt not like an outsider trying to belong, but like someone who perhaps had been in the wrong place all along. The drive home was quiet at first, the car filled with the weight of what had just happened. The darkness outside seemed to cocoon us, providing a buffer between the confrontation we'd left behind and whatever lay ahead. "Mom," Ethan's small voice came from the back seat. "Are you and Dad getting a divorce?" The question pierced my heart. In the emotional chaos, I hadn't even thought about what this meant for our marriage, only that I needed to remove myself and my children from that toxic situation. "I don't know, sweetheart," I answered honestly. "Right now, I just needed us to leave that dinner. We'll figure everything else out later." "They were being really mean," he said. "Especially Dad." "Yes, they were," I agreed, seeing no point in pretending otherwise. Ethan was old enough to recognize what had happened. Lily reached forward from the back seat and squeezed my shoulder. "I'm sorry if I made things worse, Mom. I just couldn't sit there anymore while they treated you like that." I glanced at her in the rearview mirror, this fierce, compassionate young woman who had shown more courage than I had in years. "You didn't make things worse, Lily. You spoke the truth, and I'm incredibly proud of you." "What happens now?" she asked, the teenage bravado from earlier, giving way to uncertainty. "Now we go home, make some hot chocolate, and take care of each other," I said. "Tomorrow is soon enough to think about everything else." When we arrived home, the house felt different, somehow emptier, as if Thomas's absence had created a vacuum. But there was also a strange sense of peace, like the calm after a long, overdue storm. True to my word, I made hot chocolate and we piled onto the couch with blankets and a mindless comedy show on TV. Neither child wanted to talk more about what had happened, and I was grateful for the reprieve. Around 9 o'clock, my phone began buzzing with texts from Thomas. "Where are you? Are you okay? Please call me." Then, "I'm sorry about dinner. I shouldn't have told that story." And later, "My parents feel terrible. Everyone's asking about you." I silenced the phone without responding. His apologies felt hollow, focusing on the specific incident rather than the pattern of behavior that had led to it. Tonight wasn't about Thomas or his family's feelings. It was about healing the wounds they had inflicted on us over the years. After putting Ethan to bed, I found Lily in her room, staring at her ceiling with headphones on. She removed them when I sat on the edge of her bed. "How are you holding up?" I asked. She shrugged. "I keep thinking about the look on everyone's faces. It felt good in the moment, but now I'm wondering if I went too far." "You stood up for what's right," I assured her. "That's never going too far." "I just don't understand how Thomas changed so much," she said, deliberately using his name rather than Dad, which spoke volumes about how she was feeling. "He used to be so different with you, with us." "People sometimes lose their way," I said, trying to be fair despite my own hurt, "especially when they're pulled between different versions of themselves." "Do you still love him?" she asked bluntly. The question caught me off guard. "I love the man I married," I said finally. "I'm not sure that's who he is anymore." After Lily fell asleep, I sat alone in the kitchen, the house quiet around me. That's when my phone rang with a call from a number I didn't recognize. It turned out to be Thomas's cousin, Sarah. "Angela, I hope it's okay that I called," she said hesitantly. "Thomas gave me your number. I just wanted to check that you were all right and to say that what happened tonight wasn't right." Her unexpected support brought fresh tears to my eyes. "Thank you, Sarah. That means a lot. I've always admired how you handled yourself with the family," she continued. "I should have said something sooner when I saw how they treated you." We talked for a few minutes more, and by the time we hung up, I felt slightly less alone. Then came another surprise, a text from Amanda Thomas's usually cold sister. "I owe you an apology. Would you be willing to talk tomorrow?" I didn't respond immediately, unsure if this was genuine or some attempt to smooth things over for Thomas's sake. Around midnight, I called my sister Jenna, waking her up to pour out the whole story. Within an hour, she had packed a bag and was driving the 2 hours to my house, insisting that I shouldn't be alone. "You've been dealing with this by yourself for too long," she said when she arrived, hugging me tightly. "You don't have to anymore." The next morning, Ethan was quiet and clingy, worried about what would happen with his father. Lily was protective, staying close and watching me for signs of distress. Jenna took charge of making breakfast and fielding the continuous calls from Thomas that I wasn't ready to answer. Finally, around noon, I agreed to speak with him. "He's going to keep calling until you do," Jenna reasoned. "Better to set some boundaries now." When Thomas arrived at the house, he looked terrible, disheveled, like he hadn't slept, his eyes red-rimmed. He stood awkwardly in our living room, the space suddenly feeling foreign with him in it. "Angela," he began, his voice hoarse, "I'm so sorry about last night. I was drinking too much and I wasn't thinking clearly." "This isn't about last night," I said quietly. "It's about years of small moments that led to last night. It's about you becoming someone I don't recognize anymore." "That's not fair," he protested, a flash of the old defensiveness returning. "I've given you and the kids everything: a beautiful home, financial security, opportunities." "Things," I interrupted. "You've given us things, Thomas, but somewhere along the way you stopped giving us respect, especially me." His face crumpled slightly. "I respect you. I've always respected you." "No," I said firmly. "You respected who you thought I could become. You saw me as a project, someone you could mold into fitting your world. When that didn't happen completely, you began to resent me for it." He sat down heavily on the couch, running his hands through his hair. "My family adores Ethan," he said, changing tactics. "They'll be devastated if we separate." "Your family tolerates me as Ethan's mother," I corrected him. "They've never accepted me as part of the family, and you've gradually stopped expecting them to." We talked for hours, moving in circles between his defensive justifications, genuine moments of realization, and promises to change. I remained calm but firm, making it clear that I needed time and space to think about what I wanted for my future. "I'm staying with Jenna for a while," I told him. "The kids, too. We all need some distance to process what's happened." "You can't take my son," he began, but stopped when he saw my expression harden. "Our son," I corrected. "And we're not disappearing. We just need some time." As Thomas prepared to leave, he turned back with a vulnerability I hadn't seen in years. "I do love you, Angela. I've just forgotten how to show it properly." I nodded, acknowledging his words without committing to anything. "I need to rediscover who I am outside of trying to fit into your world. Maybe you need to remember who you were before your family's expectations became more important than our happiness." After he left, I felt simultaneously drained and strangely empowered. For the first time in years, I had spoken my truth without filtering it through the lens of what Thomas or his family might think. It was terrifying and liberating all at once. That evening, as Jenna helped me pack bags for the kids and myself, I came across a photo from our early days, Thomas and me at a local carnival, cotton candy in hand, laughing without self-consciousness. The man in that photo felt like a stranger now, and I wondered if he was truly gone or just buried under layers of expectations and pretense. Either way, I knew I couldn't continue as things had been. Something had fundamentally broken at that Thanksgiving table, not just between Thomas and me, but in my willingness to accept less than I deserved. 1 month after the disastrous Thanksgiving dinner, I was settling into a new routine in a small but comfortable 2-bedroom apartment. The kids and I had moved in 2 weeks earlier after it became clear that Thomas and I needed more than just a temporary separation to figure things out. The apartment was nothing like the spacious house we'd shared with Thomas. It was in an older building with creaky floors and radiators that clanked at night. But it was clean, affordable on my nursing director salary, and most importantly, it was a space that felt entirely mine, no echoes of Thomas's family's tastes or expectations. I had filled it with colorful throw pillows, framed nature photos I'd taken over the years but never displayed, and houseplants that transformed the space into something alive and vibrant. Lily had painted an abstract mural on one wall of the living room, something that would have been unthinkable in our old house where Thomas insisted on tasteful neutrals that would maintain resale value. This place feels more like you, Mom, Lily commented one evening as we prepared dinner together in the small kitchen. You seem different here, more relaxed. She was right. Despite the upheaval and ongoing stress of the separation, I found myself breathing more freely. I had started seeing a therapist, Dr. Karen, who was helping me understand the subtle ways I had diminished myself over the years to fit into Thomas's world. The children were adjusting in their own ways. Ethan spent weekends with Thomas, returning with stories of elaborate outings to museums or sporting events, clearly Thomas's attempts to maintain his bond with his son. During the week, Ethan was quieter than before, sometimes asking poignant questions about whether we would ever be a family again. We had also started family therapy sessions with a kind but direct counselor named David, who created a safe space for both children to express their feelings about the separation. Ethan admitted feeling torn between his parents, while Lily confessed to feeling guilty about her outburst at Thanksgiving, wondering if she had caused the split. "You didn't cause anything," I assured her during one session. "You just brought into the open what had been building for a long time." Thomas and I were communicating mainly through text messages and brief exchanges during child handoffs. He had initially reacted to the separation with a mixture of disbelief and anger, unable to comprehend how things had unraveled so quickly. But the reality was that our marriage had been fraying for years. I had just been carefully tying knots to hold it together, while Thomas remained oblivious. The holiday season was difficult. We had always made a big deal of Christmas with elaborate decorations and traditions. This year I created new, simpler traditions with the children gingerbread house making at our small kitchen table, stringing popcorn for the modest tree we set up in the corner of the living room, volunteering at a local food bank on Christmas Eve. Thomas had the children for Christmas Day, taking them to his parents' estate for the traditional winter's family celebration. I spent the day with Jenna and her family, trying not to think about previous Christmases and all that had changed. When the children returned that evening, Ethan was laden with expensive gifts while Lily was subdued. "Grandma Margaret actually talked to me this time," she told me later. "She asked about school and stuff. It was weird." "Weird good or weird bad?" I asked. Lily considered. "Just different, like she's trying but doesn't really know how." January brought new developments. Thomas had begun his own therapy, something I never thought I'd see. "My therapist says I've been using my family's approval as a substitute for developing my own identity," he told me during one of our increasingly civil conversations. I had also reconnected with old friends who had gradually fallen away during my marriage. Monica, my roommate from nursing school, visited, often bringing wine and laughter back into my life. Carlos, a fellow nurse who had always made me laugh during difficult shifts, invited me to join a hiking group that met on weekends when the children were with Thomas. These friendships reminded me of who I had been before I became Mrs. Thomas Winters, a woman with opinions and interests of my own, someone who didn't constantly measure her words against an invisible standard of acceptability. Thomas and I met for coffee one cold February afternoon, sitting across from each other at a neutral cafe halfway between our two homes. He looked different somehow, less polished, with his hair slightly longer and casual clothes, replacing his usual tailored look. "I had dinner with my parents last week," he said after we'd exchanged updates about the children. "I told them how my behavior and theirs contributed to the breakdown of our marriage." I raised my eyebrows, trying to imagine that conversation. "How did that go?" "About as well as you'd expect," he said with a rueful smile. My father changed the subject. "My mother cried and said she only wanted what was best for me, but I stood my ground this time." "That must have been difficult." I acknowledged, genuinely impressed. He nodded. "It was, but necessary. My therapist helped me see how I've been seeking their approval my entire life, even at the expense of my own happiness." "And yours," he added quietly. We talked for over an hour, the longest real conversation we'd had in years. Thomas spoke about his fear of disappointing his family, how he'd gradually adopted their values to avoid conflict, and how he now recognized the damage that had done. "I became the very people who made you feel small," he admitted. "I'm so ashamed of that." I appreciated his insight, but remained cautious. Awareness is important, Thomas, but it doesn't automatically change patterns that have been established for years. I know, he said. I'm not asking you to come back or forgive everything right away. I just want you to know I'm doing the work to understand what went wrong. Not just for us, but for me. February turned to March, and with the first hints of spring came unexpected developments. I was nominated for a Nursing Excellence Award for a program I developed to support parents of chronically ill children. The award ceremony was scheduled for a Friday evening when I had the children. I can take them, Thomas offered, when I mentioned needing to find a sitter. Actually, I'd like to attend if that's okay with you. I want to support your achievement. His request surprised me. Throughout our marriage, Thomas had rarely attended my work functions, considering them less important than his medical galas and conferences. His interest now felt genuine, but also highlighted how little he had valued my career before. You're welcome to come, I said carefully. The children would probably like having you there. The night of the ceremony, I wore a deep blue dress I had bought specifically for the occasion, something I would never have done in the past, when I deferred to Thomas's taste in everything. My hair was styled in a way I liked, not the conservative look his mother had always approved of. When Thomas arrived to pick up the children, he paused in the doorway looking at me with genuine appreciation. You look beautiful, he said simply. That color suits you perfectly. I thanked him, noting how different his compliment felt from the backhanded ones I'd grown accustomed to. You look nice, though. Perhaps something more subtle would be better for the occasion. The ceremony was held in the hospital's renovated auditorium. I sat with my colleagues, while Thomas took a seat with the children a few rows back. When my name was called, the applause was enthusiastic, particularly from a group of parents whose children I had cared for over the years. As I accepted the award and gave a brief speech about the importance of supporting families through medical crises, I caught Thomas's eye in the audience. He was watching me with an expression I hadn't seen in years, undisguised pride, and maybe something else, something like regret. Afterward, at the reception, Thomas approached with the children. That was incredible, Angela, he said, handing me a bouquet of flowers he must have brought with him. I knew you were good at your job, but hearing those parents talk about what you've done for them, I didn't fully understand the impact of your work until tonight. His words struck me. That had been a fundamental problem in our marriage. I had always been expected to understand and value his work, while mine was treated as secondary, a job, rather than a vocation. Thank you for coming, I said sincerely. It means a lot to have you all here. Later that month, Thomas asked if we could try dating again. Not moving back in together or rushing to reconcile, but getting to know each other as the people we were now, not who we had been. I'd like to take you to dinner, he said. Just to talk, no pressure or expectations. I hesitated, wary of falling back into old patterns. But Dr. Karen had been encouraging me to trust my instincts again, to believe in my ability to maintain boundaries. Dinner would be nice, I agreed finally. But just dinner, Thomas. I'm still figuring out what I want long term. Our first date was awkward. Both of us unsure how to relate to each other outside the roles of husband, wife, and co-parents that had defined us for so long. But it was also refreshing to speak without the weight of immediate domestic concerns or the watchful eyes of his family. Thomas told me about changes he was making at work, stepping back from certain committees to create more balance in his life. I shared stories about my expanding role at the hospital and the writing workshop I had joined. You're writing again? He asked, genuinely interested. You used to talk about that in our early days, but then you stopped mentioning it. I stopped doing it, I corrected him. Somehow it got pushed aside with everything else. He looked troubled by this. I never meant for you to give up the things you loved. I know, I said. But relationships require compromise, and somewhere along the way, I started doing all the compromising. Our dating continued cautiously through April and into May. Sometimes we went out, just the two of us. Other times we planned activities with the children. Slowly I began to see glimpses of the Thomas I had fallen in love with, the man who valued kindness and connection over status, who could laugh at himself, who looked at me with genuine interest rather than assessment. One significant moment came when Thomas invited me to a dinner with his colleagues and their spouses. In the past, these events had been exercises in anxiety for me, with Thomas often coaching me beforehand on topics to avoid or directing my choices during the evening. This time, when I asked if he had any suggestions for the dinner, his response surprised me. "Just be yourself," he said. "That's who I want there with me." During the dinner, I spoke freely about my work and opinions. When the conversation turned to a political topic where I knew Thomas and I disagreed, I stated my view clearly. Instead of trying to redirect me or looking uncomfortable, Thomas engaged thoughtfully with my perspective, neither agreeing artificially nor dismissing my input. Later that night, as he walked me to my door, he said, "I was wrong about so many things, Angela, but especially about the idea that you needed to change to fit into my world. You were always enough just as you were. I was the one who needed to change." Tears pricked my eyes at his words, at the validation I had sought for so long. But I also recognized that while his acknowledgement healed something in me, my sense of self-worth no longer depended on his or anyone else's approval. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "It means a lot to hear it." In June, 6 months after that fateful Thanksgiving, we reached a turning point. The children and I had settled into our apartment, creating new routines and traditions that felt authentic. Thomas had continued his therapy and made real changes in how he related to his family and to us. We had built a new kind of relationship, more equal and honest than what we had before. "I miss you," Thomas admitted one evening as we sat on a park bench watching Ethan play soccer with friends. "I miss us as a family, but I don't want to go back to how things were. I want something better for all of us." I had been thinking the same thing. The pain of Thanksgiving had transformed into something unexpected, a catalyst for growth and honesty that might not have happened otherwise. "I think we could try," I said cautiously, "not moving back into the old house or resuming our old life, but creating something new together, something based on mutual respect and separate but equal identities." Thomas took my hand, his eyes serious. "I can't promise I won't ever mess up again. But I can promise to listen when you tell me I have to take responsibility and to keep doing the work. And I can promise to speak up sooner, to value my own needs and perspective as much as yours," I added. We didn't have all the answers, and rebuilding trust would be an ongoing process. But for the first time in years, we were truly seeing each other clearly and choosing to move forward with open eyes. As spring turned to summer, we began the delicate process of redefining our family. Thomas put the old house up for sale, a symbolic letting go of the life that had stopped working for us. We found a new home, smaller but warmer, with space for everyone's interests and input in its decoration and function. My relationship with both children deepened through the challenges we had faced. Lily and I had always been close, but now there was a new dimension of mutual respect as she witnessed me standing up for myself. Ethan, initially confused and upset by the changes, gradually developed a more balanced view of both his parents, seeing our strengths and flaws with growing maturity. Perhaps most surprisingly, my relationship with Thomas's family evolved. His mother, shaken by the near loss of her son's marriage and by Lily's revelations at Thanksgiving, made awkward but genuine efforts to connect with me. His sister Amanda and I would never be best friends, but we found common ground in our love of gardening, something I had never known about her in all our years of strained family gatherings. Looking back on the journey that began with that painful Thanksgiving, I realized that sometimes it takes a complete breakdown to create the possibility of something authentically better. My daughter's courage in speaking truth that day hadn't just changed my marriage, it had changed me, reminding me of my own worth and voice. I had learned that real love doesn't require you to make yourself smaller to fit someone else's expectations. It creates space for you to grow into your fullest self, supported, rather than constrained by the relationship. Thomas was learning this too gradually, freeing himself from the weight of his family's expectations to discover who he truly wanted to be. We were building something new together, not perfect, but honest, with room for all of us to be fully ourselves. And in that space, we were finding a deeper love than we had known before, one based not on who we wished each other to be, but on who we truly were. Has someone in your life ever stood up for you when you couldn't find your own voice? Or have you been the one to speak truth in a difficult moment? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. And if this journey resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe to hear more stories of finding strength in unexpected moments. Remember that you deserve to be valued for exactly who you are, not who others think you should be. Thank you for listening, and until next time, trust your worth and your voice. It may be more powerful than you know.